Hi, I'm Andy Mioch and you are watching AnewZ. Here are the headlines. Russia carries out largest ever overnight drone attack on Ukraine, says it's retaliation for recent attacks on civilian areas. The US delays EU tariffs until July 9th after the initial 50% tariff threat. International Conference on Tackling Islamophobia opens in Baku. Thank you for tuning in. Russia carried out its largest ever overnight drone attack on Ukraine, according to Kyiv. Following the third consecutive night of mass aerial attacks, US President Donald Trump called out the Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying he had gone, quote, absolutely crazy. Ukraine's leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, called for more pressure on Moscow.
For the third consecutive night, Russia has launched a record number of drones at Ukraine in what Kyiv says is the largest aerial assault of the war. According to Ukraine's Air Force, at least 364 drones and missiles were fired overnight into Monday. On the previous night, at least 12 people were killed, including 3 children in the northern Zhytomyr region. The Kremlin said the strikes were retaliation for recent Ukrainian attacks on Russian civilian areas. President Putin is doing what must be done to ensure the security of Russia, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov stated on Monday. In a parallel development, Russia claimed it intercepted 96 Ukrainian drones across 12 regions, including 6 over Moscow. Ukraine launched drones with airports closed. The wave of violence has triggered international reactions. US President Donald Trump sharply criticized Putin.
I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something has happened to him. He has gone absolutely crazy. He is needlessly killing a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about soldiers. Missiles and drones are being shot into cities in Ukraine for no reason whatsoever.
Trump also hinted at new sanctions against Moscow while offering a sharp rebuke to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Despite the criticism, the Kremlin thanked Trump for his role in facilitating new Ukraine peace talks. Peskov described the current climate as one of emotional overload affecting all sides. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron, speaking during a visit to Vietnam, said Trump realizes Putin lied to him and hoped his frustration would translate into action. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul emphasized that Europe remains united in its support for Ukraine, calling it both an encouragement to Kyiv and a warning to Moscow.
Ukraine has shown that it is ready to negotiate. It is ready for a ceasefire. Ukraine is ready for peace negotiations. Vladimir Putin is once again responding to this with an unprecedented hail of missiles and drones. And that shows that he is not ready for peace at this point in time. But we want peace. And the only way to peace is through negotiations and a willingness to negotiate. As long as this willingness does not exist on the Russian side, Ukraine can rely on us.
Nicht vorhanden ist, wird die Ukraine sich auf uns verlassen können.
As the Russian barrage continued, Poland scrambled its air force alongside NATO allies to protect its airspace, highlighting fears of escalation spilling beyond Ukraine's borders.
On the latest in the Russia-Ukraine war, we're talking with former military officer Andriy Ordinovich, coming to us from Kyiv. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Ukraine's Air Force says the last few days saw the largest aerial assaults since the start of the war. Even Trump went on to say that Putin has gone absolutely crazy. What can these attacks do to the already fragile negotiating process?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, it's true. We are faced for the last 3 days major combined attack on Ukraine, ballistic missile, as well as the very large number of USV. This kind of combined attack, especially with the high casualty rates and high profile of attacks, has significant undermining the already fragile negotiation process between Ukraine and Russia, and it could even be a more serious one. First of all, such attack are eroding the initial trust, what started to appear from a couple negotiation of working group. Second one, it is undermining some political and creating additional political and public pressure from both sides. From a political side, some international experts and the leadership who are supporting they could use appetite to the support peace agreement, as well as to some extent it could even come opposite to the idea of helping negotiation. Also, this attack are supporting the idea to raise a cycle of escalation. And fourthly, it is also not working for the confidence building measure, which was demonstrated 3 days continuously when we exchanged prisoners of war.
Well, in the last 3 days with the exchanges, but also the mass attacks, we've heard President Zelensky saying that it is a sense of total impunity that allows Russia to carry out such strikes. He called for more real pressure on Moscow. Are there any sanctions that can, in your mind, prove effective here, bring that real pressure?
Exactly. This position of our president, as well as the position of American president regarding the something going wrong and misunderstanding from the policy of Mr. Putin, any negotiation, in order to get a progress, we have to have a minimum level of trust, as well as sometimes political, diplomatical pressure. The economical pressure, it is not the staying aside and should be applied in the same time like political and diplomatical one. First of all, we have to keep more strong pressure on secondary sanction, specifically to the companies and countries which are helping the Russians to get the improvement within a military industrial complex. Second sanction, economical, could be applied to the oil price, as well as to entire oil and gas infrastructure in Russia, not allowing them to dig deeply what they need, the technology, as well as fight against the shadow fleet. Not less important to have a technical manufacturing bans, specifically when we know for the last this 5 months, 80% of semiconductor dual-use equipment, which Russian use for the missiles as well as UAV, are coming from Republic of China. And also very important to continue the policy of Western country to seizure of the frozen Russian assets and direct them, for example, to Ukraine manufacturing, improving our strengths, because only strengths could help us to have more compromised position during the negotiation.
Well, Andriy, thank you so much for joining us and offering your insight. In other news, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said that his country would be able to survive if the nuclear talks with Washington fail. This comes a day after the U.S. President Donald Trump described weekend talks with Tehran as very good and hinted that an announcement could come in the, quote, next 2 days. According to the Omani mediator, the latest talks in Rome brought some progress.
As global attention stays on nuclear non-proliferation and Middle East stability, Iran-US negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program continue, though the next round of talks remain uncertain. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed that no agreement has yet been reached on the date or venue for the next round of negotiations. He added that Tehran is proceeding patiently and calmly and reiterated Iran's commitment to its right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. The fifth round of talks in Rome last Friday, mediated by Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, saw some but inconclusive progress amid ongoing disputes over Iran's uranium enrichment. However, speaking to reporters in New Jersey, US President Donald Trump expressed optimism about the recent diplomatic efforts with Tehran.
Having to do with nuclear, we've had some very, very good talks with Iran, and I don't know if I'll be telling you anything good or bad over the next 2 days, but I have a feeling I might be telling you something good. We've had some real progress, serious progress.
While both sides maintain firm public positions, recent developments suggest that there is still room for negotiation in the effort to resolve the long-standing nuclear dispute.
Now, for more on the Iranian position on the nuclear talks with the US, we go to Tehran and Turaj Shiralilu.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian is scheduled to visit Muscat, Oman on Tuesday and Wednesday to boost the friendly relations, while Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran is reviewing the proposal by Oman about the ongoing Iran-US nuclear talks. President Pezeshkian told the visiting Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi in Tehran last week that his visit will be a turning point to deepen the close bilateral relations. Also, reports confirmed by Foreign Minister Araghchi said al-Busaidi has provided Iran and the US with a proposal during their recent nuclear discussions. On the verge of the Iranian president's visit to Muscat, Iranian and US negotiators met last Friday in Rome to hold their fifth round of indirect talks mediated by the Omani Foreign Ministry. Foreign Minister Araghchi confirmed that Oman provided the Iranian and US delegations with a proposal which he said is under study. The Omani proposal is reportedly suggesting a 6-month moratorium of Iran's uranium enrichment in return for lifting certain sanctions unilaterally imposed by the US on Iran. Although Iran has categorically rejected the US demand of zero enrichment as its red line, US President Donald Trump has said there was real progress in latest talks with Iran. The visit by Iranian President to Oman follows Trump's tour of the US allies Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar 2 weeks ago. While Iran and the neighboring Persian Gulf Arab states are currently experiencing a thaw in their ties, Tehran and Muscat have enjoyed traditionally friendly political and trade relations. These close relations date back to the early 1970s, when the pro-West Shah of Iran militarily helped Oman during the civil war. Moreover, Oman has adopted an independent approach in its ties with Tehran compared to other regional Arab countries, which generally adjust with Saudi Arabia their Iran's relations. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
Donald Trump has announced he is delaying the implementation of a 50% tariff on European goods following his phone call with European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen. Earlier, Trump threatened with a 50% levy on EU products, saying that the trade talks with the EU had stalled.
Called me, as you know, and she asked for an extension on the June 1st date. And she said she wants to get down to serious negotiation because I've told you specifically, but I told anybody that would listen, they have to do that. And we had a very nice call, and I agreed to move it. I believe June 9th, it would be July 9th would be the date. That was the date she requested. Could we move it from June 1st to July 9th? And I agreed to do that. And that she said we will rapidly get together and see if we can work something out.
Stock markets across Asia saw modest gains while the euro strengthened after Trump's unexpected announcement. MSCI's index of world shares rose slightly, as well as Japan's Nikkei. Trading volumes on Monday are expected to be thin, given the markets in the United States and the United Kingdom are closed due to public holidays. The summit of Southeast Asian leaders kicked off in Kuala Lumpur, with the ASEAN leaders signing a 20-year vision for regional integration. The summit in Malaysia is set to cover a number of topics, including the protracted conflict in Myanmar and the global trade uncertainty.
The annual ASEAN two-day summit began in Malaysia on Monday, with regional leaders voicing concern over growing global trade uncertainty, largely driven by US tariff threats under President Donald Trump. As market volatility rises and economic growth slows, the 10-member bloc is seeking ways to safeguard regional stability and strengthen economic resilience. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, hosting this year's summit, said he had written to President Trump requesting a meeting between the United States and ASEAN to address escalating trade tensions.
Quiet engagement matters, and this small and the breach may be fragile, but as they say in matters of peace, even a fragile breach is better than a widening gulf. I strongly believe in the fortitude and staying power of ASEAN to withstand the headwinds and weather the storms of the challenges and uncertainties facing us.
The Trump administration's recent threats to impose sweeping tariffs on global partners have sparked alarm among Southeast Asian economies, many of which depend heavily on trade. While Myanmar's internal conflict remains on the agenda, much of the summit's focus has turned to managing the economic fallout of US trade actions and reinforcing regional partnerships in response. ASEAN leaders are also set to meet Chinese Premier Li Qiang and officials from the Middle East on Tuesday, as part of efforts to broaden economic cooperation and navigate the shifting global trade landscape.
Spain hosted representatives from European and Arab nations for a meeting of the Madrid group to discuss ways to pressure Israel into ending the war in the Gaza Strip. Madrid has called for an arms embargo against the Israeli government to end the war, according to the Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel Álvarez. He also suggested that sanctions could be imposed on individuals who obstruct the two-state solution. The Madrid meeting comes ahead of a UN conference on the two-state solution, set for June 17th in New York. Over in France, farmers have blocked roads near Paris and rallied at the National Assembly, demanding lawmakers pass a bill that would ease rules on pesticide use and irrigation.
Farmers across France launched a new wave of protests targeting key roads near Paris and rallying outside the National Assembly. They're demanding that a new farming bill, already passed by the Senate, be approved by the lower house without changes. The bill would relax rules on pesticide and water use, which farming unions say are essential for protecting jobs, boosting competitiveness and cutting through red tape.
We are here to defend our bill that we submitted to the National Assembly. A bill that includes various points that were promised during the last demonstrations in January 2024, and all of them have been amended.
So if we ever manage to lift these constraints, it could also allow farmers who are small business owners to start businesses on their farms and be more or less on an equal footing with our European colleagues. For now, we're not talking about what's happening outside Europe. It's really what's happening inside Europe. And so we need this European harmonization, and France needs to realize that we need to stop over-transposing, because, in fact, we are destroying our production system, just as we did with health, just as we did with industry, just as we are doing with agriculture.
But the issue has sparked controversy. One of the most debated points is a push by farming unions to reauthorize a powerful insecticide ban in the EU. It's been linked to widespread bee and pollinator die-offs, making it a target of environmental groups. Proposed amendments in the lower house aim to block the return of this pesticide and tighten water use rules, which would scale back Senate-backed plans to expand irrigation. Left-wing parties, the Greens and France Unbowed, oppose the Senate's version of the bill. They say it weakens environmental protections and could harm biodiversity and public health on the long run.
An international conference on tackling Islamophobia has opened here in Baku. With participants from over 40 countries, the two-day event is meant to address digital hate, policy discrimination, and the rising anti-Muslim sentiment worldwide.
For the third consecutive year, Azerbaijan is reaffirming its leadership in the global effort to combat Islamophobia. Baku is hosting the International Scientific Conference, Islamophobia Unveiling Bias, Shattering Stigma, marking the third anniversary of the International Day to Combat Islamophobia. Jointly organized by the Baku International Multiculturalism Center, the Center of Analysis of International Relations, and the Baku Initiative Group, the event has become a critical platform for examining anti-Muslim sentiment and fostering global dialogue. This year's conference brings together over 100 foreign guests, including scholars, policy experts, religious leaders, and representatives from NGOs, nearly from 40 countries. It is supported by major international partners, including the G20 Interfaith Forum, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Doha International Center, ISESCO, and the Council of Muslim Elders, Central Council of Muslim in Germany, and the International Muslim Forum.
I believe that this forum, where so many people have gathered together from diverse backgrounds and an institutional background, is a first step to deliberate and discuss what are the priorities, how can we resolve the challenges that are surrounding us, how can we address the surge of Islamophobia in many aspects. So the first step is to get together and gather all of these scholars and luminaries from different backgrounds. So I applaud and commend Azerbaijan, the government of Azerbaijan, and the organizers.
The two-day conference will address a wide range of pressing issues under the theme sessions such as global trends in Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred in politics, Islamophobia in different contexts such as regional perspectives, the role of AI and digital media reinforcing Islamophobic bias, women identity and stereotypes, navigating religious and cultural prejudices, and also institutionalized legislation against Muslims in Europe. The preserving Islamic cultural heritage in a changing world as well. And in the very last topic, the panel discussions will include the youth's call for inclusion, fighting prejudice and misinformation.
Well, especially the focus on Europe, which is the region where we try to manage a counter-narrative, is that there is a great religious illiteracy. There is ignorance on what is religion, and added to this problem, there is ignorance and a misleading interpretation of Muslims and of Islam. So Islam is targeted through ignorance and prejudice, and Muslims are discriminated in terms of something which is not citizenship, not believers, and not persons that can be part of the society with their skill.
The event highlights how Islamophobia has evolved in the digital age, with sessions dedicated to the influence of AI algorithms and the spread of bias across the digital platforms, demonstrating Azerbaijan's commitment to engaging with modern, multifaceted challenges. According to the chairman of Analysis of International Relations Center, combating Islamophobia and promoting Islamic unity have become central to Azerbaijan's foreign policy. And the United Nations General Assembly adopted March 15 as the International Day to combat Islamophobia in 2022. Following the initial declaration in 2020, Azerbaijan has consistently hosting the leading voices to address religious intolerance on a global scale. By fostering open academic debate and diplomatic cooperation, Baku is steadily positioning itself as a regional and international hub for intercultural dialogue, with growing participation from institutions across Europe.
Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said peace with Azerbaijan is near, and pledged to amend the constitution if the country's top court blocks the peace agreement. Speaking alongside the Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico at the Yerevan Dialogue 2025 forum, Pashinyan said he's confident that there will be no war, adding that he is committed to continue efforts toward a lasting peace that could transform the region. Fico spoke on the need to finalize the normalization process for regional stability and invited Pashinyan to visit Slovakia.
Especially in the areas of nuclear energy.
Russian and Turkish foreign ministers Sergei Lavrov and Hakan Fidan are set to meet in Moscow to discuss ongoing peace negotiations and regional security. Besides the Russia-Ukraine negotiation process, they are expected to speak on the South Caucasus, the Black Sea region, Libya and Syria. Ankara and Islamabad have agreed to strengthen cooperation in defense, energy and transport sectors following a meeting of the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan with Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif in Istanbul. The Turkish side stated there were also talks on regional and global issues, including the fight against terrorism. Earlier this month, Ankara expressed support for Islamabad after India launched strikes on Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Iran says it's ready to boost regional trade by offering logistics support to neighbors through its southern port city of Bandar Abbas. Speaking at the launch of the Tehran-Afrin dry port terminal's final phase, Iranian officials said landlocked countries like Russia, Belarus, and several Central Asian and South Caucasus states can now access global markets via Iran's transport network. The United Nations World Food Programme warned that Afghanistan's economy is collapsing and that a third of the population is at risk of hunger. They appealed for a little more than $500 million to support the most vulnerable parts of the society. Our Tamim Bahis has more in Kabul.
A growing hunger and nutrition crisis in Afghanistan is putting millions of lives at risk. The WFP says it urgently needs $555 million to continue its operations over the next 6 months. According to WFP, nearly 15 million people, almost a third of the population, need emergency food assistance just to survive. Right now, the WFP can only reach just over 6 million, leaving more than 8 million people without help, including over 2 million women and children. 8 in 10 Afghan families can't afford a minimally nutritious diet, and 3 in 4 are forced to borrow money just to buy basic groceries. This crisis hits women and children hardest. WFP expects 3.5 million children under 5 to suffer from malnutrition this year, a figure not seen in 4 years. Already, 1.2 million pregnant and breastfeeding women are malnourished and urgently need support. Last year, WFP assisted nearly 10 million women and children, treating 1 million mothers and 1.4 million children for malnutrition. But severe funding cuts are forcing the agency to scale back. Children under 2 now receive support, while older toddlers go without. Pregnant women are getting only half of the food they need. Without urgent action and funding, the World Food Programme warns that a generation of Afghan children could face permanent health consequences or worse. The time to act, they say, is now. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for AnewZ.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ.